what is the probability that there is at least one territorial dispute between them? That would be a very interesting problem for report, I think, actually. So does it mean that every nation, almost every nation in Europe is evil? Does it mean that? Or this is territorial disputes of China, all these all these regions. Does it mean that China is such a a nation that is always making wars with its neighbors? Cannot be that. So what does it mean? Because we are living in Japan, we tend to think that everything about Japan is so special. But that is not true. The fact that University of Tokyo is kind of Galapagos, Galapagos Island, this Galapagos, this beautiful Japanese word. Actually, its English word is like Japangaros. It's something really hard to pronounce, but it's actually happening everywhere. What University of Tokyo is experiencing is exactly the same as what French universities are experiencing, for example, or German universities. Any university other than these universities which, by fortune, speak English. It's not just the problem of Japanese universities. The problem is everywhere. So it's something that is universal. So because we live in Japan, we tend to think that everything that happens in this country are special. But that's not the case. There's something very universal here. So in general, contingency in international politics is avoidable. And it sometimes results in dramatic timelines. So of course we have territorial disputes with neighbors. But as I said, just if you are a good person, maybe you can model the process of at first nobody claims any land. No land is nobody's business. So if nobody claims the land, it's nobody's possession. But by inches and inches from both sides, two nations start claiming the territories, and they clash, and they have wars, battles. And international law presumably decides which land belongs to which nations. But there are contingencies, there are irregularities. So it's no wonder that given two nation states, there would be territorial disputes between them. It's just the nature or inherent fragility or vulnerability of this system we call nation state. So there's nothing special about Japan's territorial disputes. It's everywhere. I think taking this kind of fresh look at international problems is very important because it kind of emancipates us from this nationalistic mindset. There's nothing special about any country's territorial disputes. It's just an instance of a very universal process. Why don't we model that? I think to make a science of territorial disputes is a very interesting subject. Why don't you guys do that? Maybe you can win the Nobel Prize for peace in 20 years' time. Anyway, the second example that I like to give is the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. I was born in 1962. Were you born in 1962? 61? Yeah, we are about the same age, right? So, how many of you know about the Cuban Missile Crisis? You should know, yeah, right? Okay, anyway, most of you know. Now, in this year, American U-2 reconnaissance, they took the photograph of Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba. These are the missiles. And these missile transports and tanks for fueling and maintenance are these. Now, the problem of missile bases by Soviet Union in Cuba is that it's too close. It's like North Korea having nuclear missiles. If North Korea fires nuclear missiles, it can reach us in 30 minutes. So there's no time for us to defend. The same fear was with the Americans in the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now the timeline of the Cuban Missile Crisis is very interesting. I don't have time to go into details here. Actually, I was born here on this day, October 20th, 1962. So I was like a baby now, almost unconscious. Right? I didn't know what was going on in the world. But actually the world was on the verge of total nuclear war. I mean, if you study the timeline of the Cuban Missile Crisis, in which President Kennedy and Soviet Foreign Minister Andrei Gromyko were the main players, you feel so lucky, and because at any moment, if something went wrong, the world could have literally entered into a total nuclear war. I mean, so there was no certainty about this whole situation. So I was lucky because I was a baby. Maybe he was still, he was almost already working. I don't know, but we're just a baby, so we don't know anything about this situation. But the time, if you study the timeline, it was a very previous moment of world history. So sometimes collision between two nations can take these forms. It will be a very interesting subject for scientific studies, I believe, to model this kind of process. I mean, science has been evolving and is evolving and will evolve. Traditional subjects like physics, where they study the behavior of materials, is not the only kind of science that we need to be doing in the 21st century. It is quite conceivable that some people would be modeling these international conflicts, and which will be very interesting and which will be very important. As I said, it might be a subject for the Nobel Prize for Peace or Nobel Prize for Economics in 20 years' time. Why don't you guys do it? I mean, if you feel interested in a certain subject, you can do it, and you can just go ahead and do it. Anyway, finally, I'd like to discuss as an example of contingency the present financial crisis in the Eurozone. Now, this country, Greece, of course it is the mother of the traditional or classical European culture, but its economic size is very small. It's 1/10 of Japan. So even if Greece had a financial crisis, what? So what? I mean, nobody cared. Before it was incorporated into the Eurozone. Because the Greek economy is so tightly coupled with the economy of these countries in the Eurozone. Oh, by the way, this country is not in the Eurozone, so my apologies. There is this increased volatility in the world economy. Why? Because there is this increased connectivity. Because of this increased mutual dependencies, we have more contingencies, increased contingencies in the world. That's the problem. That's the problem we need to solve. So, last example is bubble economy. This is the time course of the famous South Sea bubble. Ever heard of the South Sea bubble? 南海放末事件 in United Kingdom in 1720. This is the time course of the stock price of the South Sea company. They, dramatically increased in value and then collapsed like this. So they increased almost 10 times and then collapsed. This is the famous South Sea bubble. Now, many economists study this kind of process. Now it appears that this kind of process is kind of inevitable. This kind of process happens because of, again, the interdependency of economic agents. If every economic agent acted independently of each other, this kind of bubble would not happen. This kind of bubble happens because people look at other people's expectations. It's like the beauty contest. If you vote for who is the most beautiful girl, and when you ask some people, who do you think privately is the most beautiful girl? Then people might have different opinions. But if you ask the people, who do you think is gonna win this beauty contest? Then there's this collective phenomenon because you don't want to be on the losing side. So everybody wants to jump onto the bandwagon, and instead of voting for the girl who you think is the most beautiful, you start voting for these girls who you think other people would deem beautiful. So that kind of collective process can lead to this kind of bubble situation, and it's best. This is the time course of the bubble economy in Japan.